Hey everyone, how's it going? This is the latest I've ever done a Periscope. I've been trying to get on here all day long and I've had client calls all day and then I just did a webinar at 7, so it has been a crazy busy day for me today. So crazy, but I'm super excited to be doing this because it's NanoPlanmo. So welcome to the Periscope. I am Jennifer Blanchard. I am an author and a story coach. I work with serious emerging novelists who want to save time and cut years off their learning curve so that they can write better stories and get published faster. So I am doing, for the month of October, National Novel Planning Month. So for anyone doing National Novel Writing Month, which starts in November, I am actually doing planning tips and everything you need to know to get your story prepped for Nano. So that way you're not sitting down November 1st and trying to write from the seat of your pants. You actually have a story in mind, you have an idea, and you've developed it enough to actually know what the story is and kind of where you're going with it. So, and this whole week, last week I talked about idea, concept, premise, and this week I'm talking all about characters. So I've been talking about, for the last 3 days, your protagonist, talking about story structure, as far as like character arc, the structure of character. You like my new hairdo? Thank you. I have it back today. I haven't had much time to do anything to it. So, and then yesterday I talked about character arc, the day before inner demons. So today I want to talk about the 4 contexts of character. So in a story, every story has 4 parts. Now, this is going to maybe be a little confusing, so let me explain first. In a movie, there's 3-act structure that takes place. Now, a novel has this exact same structure, except it's split out, or it could be split out, into 4 pieces. And that's because each piece of the story has its own context. So the 4 parts. Part 1 is setup. So in the setup of your story, you're setting up everything that's coming. You're teaching us about your character, telling us everything we need to know about them, their backstory, where they're at in their life currently, all that stuff. We hit the first plot point. We immediately transition to part 2, which is reaction. So reacting to what has now happened at the first plot point. And that's the introduction of your antagonist. So that's what happens at your first plot point. And then you're going into part 3 when you hit the midpoint. So part 3 is attack. So this is when your character is now officially ready to start making changes, to start taking action on the antagonist, doing things they weren't doing previously. And then there's part 4 of the story, which is resolution. So this is when we're resolving the story, we're coming to an end, all of that. And in those 4 parts of the story, a character, especially your the protagonist, has very specific context to fulfill. So part 1, again, is setup. And in setup, your character's context is orphan. And what that means is the character hasn't been adopted by a story yet. So you're just showing us their life currently, where they're at, all that stuff. At the first plot point is when the story officially begins. And so, New York Impact, how far into the novel should novel story should the major change take place? Okay, so your first plot point is going to happen 20% into the story, maybe 25, so upwards of 25. But you want it to happen about 20% in. That's kind of the ideal place for it. So that's about 90 pages maybe. It's about 4 chapters. It really just depends on your story. But you want to make sure that it's somewhere around there. And again, it's flexible, but you want to try to keep it 20 to 25% in. So everything that happens before that is set up. So your character context is orphan because, again, the story hasn't been adopted. The character hasn't been adopted by a story yet. So we call them orphan. Now, once we hit part 2 of the story and we're into the next context, which is reaction, so reacting to the first plot point, this is when your character context turns into wanderer. So the character's wandering around now, reacting to what just happened, trying to decide what to do, maybe hiding out or, just kind of making plans, trying to figure out what to do, laying low, running away, whatever fits, the story. But the context for the character is wanderer. So they're just wandering around. They're not ready to take action yet. They're still stuck with the inner demons. They're not really ready to overcome that yet. And then we push into part 3 of the story, which again is attack. So now the character context changes to warrior. So now your character is ready to start taking action on the antagonist. So at this point, they've gained enough momentum, learned enough stuff to be able to start overcoming some of the inner demons. Now, this isn't going to be a complete overcoming because the inner demons are still going to try to drag them down at this part, and also the antagonist is getting stronger in this part. But the character is ready to be a warrior, so ready to step up and start doing things a little differently, ready to start taking action that they couldn't have taken before, all that stuff. And then we hit second plot point and we move into part 4, which is resolution. Now, in the resolution of your story, your character context is martyr. And what that means is your character now has all the information, all the tools, all the resources, whatever they need to be successful in the story, overcome the antagonist. They have everything at this point. So now they're stepping up to be the martyr. And the martyr just means they're willing to do whatever it takes to resolve this story. They're willing to do whatever it takes to defeat the antagonist, even if that means they have to sacrifice themselves and die. Now, of course, 95% of the time that doesn't happen. The character protagonist doesn't die. But that's not always true, because sometimes they do. And in that case, they were the martyr. But the idea here is just the character is willing to do anything. They don't care what it is. They've got all the tools they need. They're just ready to overcome this, not just the inner demon, but overcoming this antagonist, stopping them, and resolving the story, and hopefully getting what they wanted from the beginning. And that's pretty much all you need to know about character context. So it's how a character changes across the story and the context that they have in each part. So if anyone has questions, please put them in the chat box now. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap this up because I have been on the phone and on webinars all day long and I am exhausted. So I'm going to go and watch a movie and just relax for a little while. Okay, death can be a great story ender if the hero is written well. Yes, absolutely. One of my favorite stories where the protagonist dies, and of course they made a second movie after this, so he ended up coming back to life somehow. But in the movie Crank, this protagonist, he basically is shot up with this stuff in the beginning, and he has to discover who did it and try to find a cure for it, so, before he dies. The problem is that there is no cure. He has to die. So at the end, he dies. But then, of course, it's a movie, so the movie people decided they need a second version of it, and so they bring him back to life somehow, which is strange. But that was one of the few stories where the protagonist did die, or mostly died, I guess. And that doesn't always happen. Most of the time, yeah, the Jason Statham movie, exactly. Right. Yeah, because from the beginning, he's been shot up with this stuff, and so there's no possible way that he can survive. But can he survive long enough to defeat the antagonist? That's really what you're rooting for in that story. And then, of course, he does die, except, again, they made a second movie, and they gave him, like, an artificial heart or something. I don't know. I didn't see it because I thought it was ridiculous. The man fell out of a helicopter and hit the ground. There's no way he's coming back to life. But whatever. It's Hollywood, so. But, yeah, their antagonist is not... Your antagonist is going to get overcome. Your protagonist is not going to die most of the time. But the point is that they're willing to. They're willing to do anything at that point, no matter what it is. That's why they're the martyr. So again, if anyone has any other questions, last chance to put them in the chat box. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap this up till tomorrow. And tomorrow's Periscope will be during the day because I actually don't have any calls tomorrow, so that'll be good. And I'm going to be talking about, Batman and Joker is a good example of hero-villain complex. Yes. Rhonda, hi Rhonda. Another good movie where the protagonist dies is Spitfire Grill. I never saw that one. But so that's an example. Spitfire Grill, the protagonist dies. And again, that does happen sometimes. It's just not as, it's pretty rare. It doesn't happen very often. Beth Ellen. Multiple pinch points to keep action moving. There are some mini resolutions before end. Right. Yeah, so pinch points, your story has 2 of them. Technically, you could have more, but you want to have 2 specific ones. One in between your first plot point and your midpoint, and one in between your midpoint and your second plot point. And those are just reminders of your antagonist or your antagonistic force. Now, again, you can resolve some stuff going into the story. You don't want to resolve anything before part 3, though, because that's when your character's ready to attack. So, before that, they can't resolve anything because they don't have the tools. They still have the inner demons dragging them down, any of that. But in part 3, you can start having some resolution. Most of it's going to happen in part 4. Is it okay to build up the antagonist the same way? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Could you clarify a little bit more? Build them up like how? And I'll give you a second to do that. Well, like I said, tomorrow I'm actually going to be talking about the antagonist. So if you're interested in learning how to make a better antagonist, what your antagonist needs in your story, I'm going to be talking about that on my Periscope tomorrow. So, be sure to check that out. And again, if you didn't catch the replays of all the other Periscopes I've been doing of story planning stuff, you can go here. Let's see. The same way as the protagonist, same plot points for development. Okay, so Your antagonist doesn't need the context that your protagonist does, and that's because most of the time antagonists don't change in a story. They can, and that's an option for you. So if you decide you want the person to change, like for example, in the Grinch changes by the end of the story. You know, he's a better person. He is changed completely. He's a different guy than he was from the beginning. But that doesn't always happen. So most of the time antagonists just truly believe that they're right, that their way of thinking is right, and that whatever that is they're trying to do, even if it's bad, to them it feels right. So they don't change because of that. In love stories, hero and heroine change. Exactly. So your hero, your heroine, those are your main characters, your protagonist. And so they're going to change in some way. They have to, because that's the whole point of a story. If the character is the same from beginning to end, they didn't do what they're supposed to do in the story. The whole point of a story is for us to be shown how a person overcomes the things that are trying to stop them. So inner demons as well as an external antagonist. So you want to make sure that, we have both of those going on. And again, if you didn't catch the replays, you can go right to this link here, catch.me/inkybytes. And all of the replays from my story planning videos this week and last week, as well as anything else I've done, will all be there. Yes, like Katniss in her Hunger Games arc. Exactly. So every character has a character arc. Protagonist has one. Now, not every character in a story has it. You can have several characters that have arcs. That's cool too, as long as your protagonist has an arc. That's the most important person in the story who has to have the arc. So if your protagonist has one, you're good. You can choose to make other characters change. That's up to you. But as long as your protagonist is changing in some way, that's what matters. You're welcome. So again, I'm wrapping this up. Thank you so much for joining me for this late night Periscope, and I hope it was helpful, and I will catch you all tomorrow, and have a great night. Bye.